Inside the Now Morning Show, good morning to you if you're just joining us. We have with us this morning the one and only master storyteller, the man that learned from Minshall himself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Now Morning Show, my good friend and one of my mentors, Mr. Wendell Manwaran. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Rockus. Good morning,
Hey.
everybody in TTT land and in Trinidad and Tobago and the World Wide Web and everywhere, all around the world. Morning.
Morning, Wendell. Morning.
Morning, Carrie. Morning, Natalie.
So, Wendell, this morning we're talking folklore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to kick off this segment, of course, with your folklore collaboration with Etienne Charles.
Yeah. That was a special one. And when you first called me and asked me if I'd read a story, I said, but I lent out my book and I don't have the, which I've lent out several times and I haven't retrieved. So I think I just need to get a stock of them. But it occurred to me that I'd done this with Etienne.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of on a whim. I happened to be in New York. He called up and say he have a project in mind if I'll come down in the studio. We went down in the studio and listened to the idea and write the song in tutus, and we made a song. And
Nice.
It's a song that I was really happy to be a part of because it gave me the opportunity to kind of figure out, well, what is our folklore and how do you communicate that in two short verses in a song and evoke a feeling. So it was a good exercise for me.
Yeah, but in that process, tell me what you learned about what is our folklore.
Well, just as I said at the top of the song, folk, the people, lore, the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the stories that come from the bowels and the belly of the people. It's not stories that were written by anyone on high and handed down. These are stories that come from our collective imagination. We don't know who the authors of the first Laja Bless story, the first Papa Bar story is, and something about these stories have the power of enduring. Something about these characters afford them the ability to endure and fascinate us time over time, so that we can even have this discussion today about what a Laja Bless is or what a Papa Boy is, or even in Natalie's scenario, the rolling calf. I have no concept of what a rolling calf might be, but it fascinates me because it came from the imagination of our ancestors. And I think a lot of these characters were melded at a certain time in our history too, where we talk about all these worlds colliding. It wasn't like a smooth transaction and say, oh, let's have some of your stories and I have some of mine and we'll put it together. No, people were torn from certain places, deposited in other places. People were displaced. Other people were trying to dominate people. But in the midst of all that, these Afro, Creole, Frenchified stories emerged about, and I think for the most part, they all tend to be what I would call cautionary tales.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you think, Wendell, these cautionary tales have influenced us as a people and our beliefs about the spirituality and life?
Well, even on a mundane level, I heard Jaron giving the example of when you're coming home and you turn around to make sure no spirits walk behind you. Even if you take that into today's context, that's to make sure that no person with malintent behind you. Or, even like what Mohammed was saying about these female characters being misunderstood. To a degree they are, because we're trying to look at them through our contemporary lens with all the political correctness of today and the Me Too movement, and the potential of a lot of these characters being cancelled is very real if we take them literally and fail to understand that they resonate on a metaphorical level. So on a certain level, our foreparents told us these stories. They didn't make much sense to us, but they were indelibly imprinted in our mind because they were so vivid. The characters were so vivid, and what they represented was so vivid. Let's say Elijah Bless. Don't stray. Don't be attracted to pretty mulatto women, because that's a party dynamic too. It was a way of women protecting and safeguarding their men who were inclined to stray. It was how I would look at it.
So you just taught me something there, Wendell. You know how you mentioned mulatto, because we understand Elijah Bless is part goat or part of some type of animal that has a cloven foot, right?
She has a cloven foot, and the idea of the cloven foot is always that old European connection to the devil. The devil is represented in the form of a goat with cloven feet. If you go back to Greek mythology, Pan, the god Pan, was like half man, half goat. And Papa Boy wasn't a goat; he was a deer, half man, half deer.
Oh.
Okay.
And the reason he wasn't a lion, at least, because we didn't have lions in these parts. So they were always use whatever elements that's in your immediate environment for it to make sense. Yeah.
Right.
Now we have the lion via the Anansi stories, which is a whole next level of folk stories that we inherited straight from
And the
Africa.
ones that I love, because as I was saying to the minister who was on with us earlier, is that they were life lessons. They were life lessons
Absolutely.
about how to deal with people who have bad intentions.
Absolutely.
You know, that smart man. It's who we call an answer then is who we call smart man now.
Smart man. Yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing, right? I know, Wendell, I know you guys have used these characters in songs. So like Salt, for example, you know, you'll directly say that basically, you know, there are vampires out there, they have sukuya out there ready to suck your blood. And you use it as a metaphor all the time. Do we still have these characters in our society today, and what form do they take?
Well, absolutely, because as you say, we will couch it metaphorically, but you can actually see somebody through their actions, through their deeds, is actually acting in a vampiric way. You know, I mean, every village had a house where some old lady, some spinster lived, and she would have been called an old hag or old higgy, and there would have been a certain amount of mistrust because she didn't socialize or whatnot. And, you know, she had the potential to be demonized and labeled as Suya. And she'd take off her skin and fly through the ball of fire and suck in night, and people come and show all these marks they have, and, you know.
And to this day, we still believe these things, because for the person who is misunderstood, for the person who doesn't conform to societal norms, we still see this person as evil, just because we don't understand how he or she is choosing to live.
Yeah. And because
we tend to fear what we don't understand, you know.
Absolutely. And a lot of these characters also employ that element of fear, because fear lingers, fear lasts, you know, the idea of, you know, don't let Dwens call your name, or you could go, they'll be leading. I find Dwens absolutely fascinating, and I don't know, a lot of these characters, if you notice, their names have a kind of a French inflection.
Yeah.
Lead me to surmise that they come from, and if you know the history of Trinidad, we were first settled in a real way by French planters from other islands, from Grenada, St. Vincent, Martinique, Haiti. They brought their stories with them. So you mentioned Etienne and his brothers, which I had the fortune of working with Walcott. You know, spending a lot of time in St. Lucia, understanding their folk traditions, their folk forms. And Papa Bois is a character that looms large in their folk stories.
Really?
Walcott uses the character of Papa Bois in Etienne and his brothers. Etienne and his brothers is also based on another folk story about these three brothers who all have to face the devil: Tija, Small John; Mija, Middle John; and Boja, Big John. And it's a universal story about, you know, man having to go out there and deal with all that life has, and how are they going to survive, you know. And what they told him to, when you meet Papa Bois, the father of the forest, be respectful. First thing you have to do with Papa Bois is be respectful.
So, Wendell, why do you think we still have people in the society who see these folklores as something evil, something bad?
Well, I think that ties back to the discussion you were having earlier on about Obia and demonizing of certain belief systems and ways of seeing and ways of perceiving and being that were alien from the dominant class at the time and the oppressor class at the time, who had a clear agenda, which was to break the backs of the people and meld them to their own needs, you know.
Literally, that's why Obia was outcast and made illegal. Literally, to keep the slaves from revolting.
Yeah, it's our magic, and they didn't. One of the things they feared most was that idea of that we could work magic, that we could do things that they didn't understand, and they did a great job in demonizing these things. I mean, to try to ban the drum, but you know, say when they banned the drum, what did we do? We created adoption. The drum using the voice, right? So they couldn't stop the expression and the imagination from being played out, but to a certain degree, we've inherited a lot of these ideas about ourselves that are not really serving us in a powerful way. It was our true empowerment.
But one of the points raised about that whole idea of Obia is that while it was meant for good then, it has been used for bad now, and how we used it then is not the way we use it now. So should we even embrace it at this point?
Well, I think if we really want to explore and get into something, you have to go back to the origins of the thing and the beginnings of the thing and try and understand it from that perspective. One of the things I try to do in all my work, whether it's in Juve or theater or whatever, is understand where the thing came from, and understand that there's a certain essence that will always be there if we hold on to that. Of course, things could get distorted along the way because of misunderstanding, because frog and chop the cricket like Beauchamp did in Tija and his brothers. Tija did not survive because he talked to the animals, and when he found Papa Bois, he was respectful, and he was still looking out for the fact that he might be the devil, but he gave him his due.
So maybe what we need to do, Wendell, is to show people the connection between the names and these folklores and who we have now in modern contemporary society. So as you say, the Papa Bois is the environmentalist, mm-hmm. This person is what we call, a red woman now, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I really like that one, I love for the larger best thing. But this is as it should be. This is our stock that we could then explore. We could mine that. So like we have a lot of animators coming up now, and I see if you check 9 out of 10 animations, they have some kind of folkloric element to them, because our folklores have superpowers. Our folklore characters, like the Marvel characters, they have superpowers. Mm-hmm. They might be considered mutants. They have human, like a Mama Glow is a half woman, half snake, a wheel, a big river snake.
And I mean, we have so many Anansis here.
Yes.
Who we call tricky daddians.
If we get into the Anansi stories, we will understand that one of the things that we have perfected is that trickster quality. That's why we are in a SOE, because nobody wants to do the right thing for themselves or for the greater good. They expect everybody else to do it. They expect that they have an exception. When 350,000 people want a pass in the middle of a pandemic, it shows, well, it applies to everybody else but me. I am exempt. I'm special, So that's one of our qualities for sure, that tricksterness. And if we were to invest in the Nancy stories, we will understand, because half the time the tricks used to backfire on Nancy if we really read the stories good.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would learn from along the way of realizing that, all right, so every time I try the smart man thing, it could backfire on me. So maybe I shouldn't do it,
Maybe.
Wendell, you mentioned,
but it never stopped Nancy from trying.
Very true, very true. Wendell, you mentioned Juve earlier, and I was wondering about the connection between our folklore and Carnival.
This is one of my things too. I think we've started to commingle our folk characters with our Carnival characters. Now, our folk characters predates the evolution of our Carnival characters. Maybe they informed it to a certain degree. And of course, one can play a mass on anything. So one could play a Papa Bois, or you could play a Sukuya, or you could make a mass portrayal. But they're really two separate streams, both from our native imagination, and both then they may similar elements. But I think our folklore is based more on our sort of rural beginnings. Like in that song I said, before the place was bright, stories would fill up the night. That whole idea of modernity and urban existence doesn't really afford space for Papa Bois and Mama Glows and things like that. So,
but do you think we should continue to share these stories with the children, though? Because as we say, they're metaphorical for what we really experience and go through now.
Yes, I think it's absolutely vital. Part of the work I do is working with young people. I work with Lilliput Theatre, and we did a show a couple of years ago called Lagahu, where we were exploring the whole idea of the Lagahu, and that whole idea of looking at somebody in your community, and just like the equivalent of the woman, the old how they call a Sukuya, there's a kind of guy in the village that you would call a Lagahu. He was probably take to drink and turn beast and, ignorant or whatever the case was. And Lilliput was based across the street from a house that was literally covered in vines, and it was hard to believe that somebody lived there, but there was a guy that lived there. So the children were fascinated by him. So I got them to explore who this man might be, and then extend that into the idea of him being a Lagahu. And just recently, Lisa Wickham's daughter did her breakout for the course that she's doing in the UAE. And she used the folklore characters and the folklore traditions. And she said in her talk at the end that it was because of that experience that she had had as a child exploring the folk tradition in this show called Lagahu. So for me, transmission is fundamental, is very important. And the way she interpreted it is she used modern technology. It was done in a lockdown. She used film, she used dance, she used music, she used all sorts of elements to tell our stories to a global audience. So for me, they're fundamental. They're part of who we are. They're part of our makeup. And the more they are in us, is the more we could add to the pot and delight and flavor and intrigue the world and ourselves.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself. So well done, Mr. Manwaran. And thank you for all the great work that you've been doing and you continue to do. And keep inspiring each other. And of course, we're going to continue passing on that battle as we go. And thank you for joining us this morning to discuss folklore, what it means and how we apply it today. Ladies and gentlemen, Wendell Manwaran, master storyteller.
Natalie, I want to know about the golden calf, please.
It's similar to what Carrie said, the thing with the chains around it.
Oh,
so, and whenever it rolls, you'd hear these chains just making that sound.
Nice.
I have heard it before, eh?
You see?
You see when you start to go down the road, ladies and gentlemen, we take a quick break. Thank you so much, Wendell.
Rocket the right note.
La Japanese. Papa Boy.